The studio lights blazed down on Jimmy Fallon's set, the familiar buzz of the audience filling the air as the band played an upbeat tune. Jimmy, all smiles in his tailored suit, leaned back in his chair, the desk between him and his guest gleaming under the spotlights. Tonight's guest was Paris Hilton, draped in a shimmering silver dress, her signature blonde hair cascading over her shoulders. The crowd roared as she waved, her smile wide but practiced, like someone who'd spent years perfecting the art of being adored. Jimmy's grin, however, had an edge tonight, a sharpness that hinted at something brewing beneath the surface. "Thanks for being here, Paris," Jimmy began, his voice warm but laced with something harder to place. "You've been in the spotlight forever, right? I mean, the 2000s, early 2010s, those were wild times for you." The audience chuckled, expecting the usual playful banter. Paris nodded, her laugh light and airy, but her eyes flicked to Jimmy, catching the shift in his tone. "Wild times. For everyone," she said, tossing her hair. "You know how it was, Jimmy. Parties, clubs, the whole scene." Jimmy's smile tightened. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk, his fingers steepled. "Oh, I know about the scene. And I'm not talking about bottle service at some Hollywood club. I'm talking about those parties. You know, the ones hosted by a certain music mogul." The audience's laughter faded into a murmur. Paris's smile froze, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Careful, Jimmy," she said, her voice still sweet but with a warning undertone. "You're sounding like you've been reading too many tabloids." Jimmy didn't back down. He pulled a stack of note cards from under his desk, flipping through them with a theatrical flourish. "Tabloids? Nah, Paris, I've got sources, and they're saying you were a regular at Diddy's parties back in the day. You know, the ones with the, let's call them exclusive guest lists." The audience gasped, a few nervous laughs breaking the tension. Paris shifted in her seat, her fingers tightening around the armrest. "Diddy's parties?" she said, forcing a laugh. "Jimmy, come on. Everyone went to those. They were just parties." Jimmy raised an eyebrow, his tone dropping to a mock-serious drawl. "Just parties? Paris, we're not talking about pin the tail on the donkey here. These were the kind of parties where the champagne flowed, the baby oil was suspiciously abundant, and the guest rooms had more action than a Vegas casino." The audience erupted, some cheering, others whispering. Paris's face flushed, her smile vanishing entirely. "Excuse me?" she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut through the noise. "You're really going there, Jimmy? On national TV?" Jimmy leaned back, unfazed, though his eyes gleamed with something reckless. "I'm just asking what everyone's whispering about, Paris. My sources, and trust me, they're good, say you weren't just sipping cocktails by the pool. They've got you pegged as a VIP in those, what did they call them? Hookup rooms?" The crowd gasped again, louder this time, the air in the studio crackling with tension. Paris's jaw tightened, her eyes blazing as she leaned forward, her voice low and venomous. "You're crossing a line, Jimmy. You don't know what you're talking about, and you're embarrassing yourself." Jimmy didn't flinch. He tossed the note cards onto the desk, letting them scatter. "Embarrassing myself? Paris, I'm not the one who was allegedly spotted slipping into private rooms with half of Hollywood's A-list while Diddy played puppet master. Care to explain what went down in those rooms? Because my sources say it wasn't just small talk and selfies." The audience was on edge now, some shouting encouragement, others murmuring in shock. Paris's composure cracked, her hands trembling, as she gripped the arms of her chair. "You're disgusting," she hissed. "You think you can just throw out lies like that and ruin people's reputations? I was young, Jimmy. We all were. Those parties were nothing like what you're insinuating." Jimmy tilted his head, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, come on, Paris. Nothing? Not even a little extracurricular activity? I mean, we've all heard the stories. Dim lights, locked doors, and let's just say the baby oil wasn't for massages." A few audience members laughed, but the mood was shifting, uneasy, charged, like the room was holding its breath. Paris stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You're pathetic," she spat, her voice shaking with rage. "You think you're some big-shot journalist? Now? Digging up dirt to make yourself look edgy? You're a talk show host, Jimmy. Stick to telling jokes." She ripped off her mic, the feedback screeching through the studio, and stormed toward the wings. The audience erupted, some cheering, others booing, as Jimmy called after her. "Paris, wait! We're just getting to the good part." She paused, at the edge of the stage, turning back, her eyes like daggers. "You want the good part, Jimmy? Keep digging, and you'll find out just how deep this goes. But don't cry when it bites you back." With that, she vanished into the darkness of the wings, leaving the audience stunned and Jimmy staring after her, his smirk fading into something unreadable. The band struck up a frantic tune to cut to commercial, but the damage was done. The studio buzzed with chaos, and social media was already lighting up with clips of the confrontation. What had Paris meant by "how deep this goes"? And what would Jimmy do next? The band's frantic notes faded as the show snapped back from commercial, the studio lights dimming slightly to refocus attention on Jimmy Fallon's desk. The audience, still buzzing from Paris Hilton's dramatic exit, shifted restlessly in their seats. Jimmy, usually the picture of effortless charm, looked rattled, his tie slightly loosened, a bead of sweat glinting on his brow. He forced a grin, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Well, folks," he said, his voice a touch too bright, "that was something, huh?" The crowd responded with a mix of cheers and uneasy laughter, unsure whether to lean into the chaos or brace for more. Behind the scenes, the control room was a storm of activity. Producers whispered furiously into headsets, their faces pale as they scrolled through the flood of social media reactions. Hashtags like Jimmy V's Paris and Diddy Party Secrets were already trending, with clips of the confrontation racking up millions of views. Some called Jimmy a hero for calling out Paris. Others branded him a bully, accusing him of ambushing a guest for clout. The ratings were spiking, but so was the backlash. Jimmy's team knew he had to tread carefully, but the host seemed to have other plans. On stage, Jimmy leaned forward, his fingers drumming on the desk as he addressed the camera directly. "Look, I know that got heated," he said, his tone shifting to something almost confessional. "But let's be real. Those parties, those stories, they've been whispered about for years. And I'm not here to play nice when the truth is staring us in the face." The audience murmured, some nodding, others exchanging skeptical glances. Jimmy's eyes flicked to the side, as if expecting Paris to re-emerge, but the wings remained dark. He pulled out another note card, holding it up like a trophy. "Before we move on, I've got one more thing to share," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. "My sources didn't just mention Paris at those parties. They've got names, big names, and they say Paris wasn't just a guest. She was, let's say, a curator of certain experiences." The crowd gasped, the air thick with anticipation. Jimmy paused for effect, letting the weight of his words sink in. "We're talking rooms where the lights were low. The music was loud, and the rules? Well, there weren't any. Drugs, deals, and other activities, all under Diddy's roof." The audience erupted, some shouting in disbelief, others egging him on. Jimmy leaned back, his smirk returning, but there was a nervous edge to it now. "And don't get me started on the baby oil," he added, winking at the camera. "I mean, what was that for? Slippery dance floors?" The crowd roared with laughter, but it was a brittle sound, undercut by the growing unease in the room. Jimmy was doubling down, and it was clear he wasn't done. From the wings, a commotion broke out. Paris stormed back onto the stage, her heels clicking furiously, her face a mask of barely contained rage. The audience gasped as she ripped a new mic from a stunned crew member and pointed it at Jimmy like a weapon. "You think you're untouchable, don't you?" she spat, her voice trembling with fury. "You think you can just sling lies about me, about those parties, and walk away clean? You're not a journalist, Jimmy. You're a clown chasing ratings." Jimmy's smirk faltered, but he recovered quickly, leaning forward with a glint in his eye. "Lies, Paris. Then why'd you run off stage? If there's nothing to hide, why not tell us your side? What were you doing in those rooms with Diddy's crew?" The audience leaned in, hanging on every word. Paris's eyes flashed, her grip on the mic tightening. "I don't owe you an explanation," she hissed. "But since you're so obsessed, let me make one thing clear. Those parties were a scene, sure, but you're painting me as some kind of mastermind. You're twisting it, Jimmy, and you know it." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You want to talk about secrets? Maybe we should talk about your friends, or your sponsors. How deep do you go?" The crowd went wild, the accusation hanging in the air like a grenade. Jimmy's face twitched, a flicker of unease crossing his features before he masked it with a laugh. "Oh, nice try, Paris. Deflect much? This isn't about me. It's about you and those late-night meetings in Diddy's mansions. Care to tell us who else was in those rooms? Or what you were all really doing?" Paris's eyes narrowed, her voice icy. "You're digging a hole, Jimmy. Keep talking, and you'll bury yourself. You think you can shame me with rumors? I've been through worse than you." She turned to the audience, her tone shifting to one of calculated charm. "He wants you to believe I'm some villain. But ask yourself, why's he so desperate to tear me down? What's he hiding?" The crowd was split, some cheering for Paris, others booing. The studio a cauldron of conflicting loyalties. Jimmy stood, his voice rising. "Hiding? I'm the one asking questions here, Paris. Like why my sources say you were seen slipping out of a locked room with a certain rapper-turned-mogul, looking, let's say, disheveled." The audience gasped again, the tension unbearable. Paris's face went pale, her lips parting as if to fire back, but no words came. Instead, she threw the mic to the floor, the feedback screeching through the studio. "You're done, Jimmy," she said, her voice low and venomous. "You think this makes you look tough? It makes you look desperate." She turned to leave again, but not before pointing at him, her eyes blazing. "This isn't over. You'll see?" The audience roared as she stormed off, the stage lights catching the glint of her dress as she disappeared. Jimmy sank back into his chair, his grin forced, his hands shaking slightly. The band struck up another tune, but the energy in the room was electric, chaotic. Social media was exploding, with fans and critics alike dissecting every word. What had Paris meant by "this isn't over"? And how far would Jimmy push this dangerous game? Jimmy Fallon slumped in his chair, his forced grin barely holding as the band's upbeat tune clashed with the electric chaos in the studio. The audience was a sea of murmurs and gasps, their phones glowing as they feverishly tweeted and posted, fueling the wildfire of Jimmy V's Paris trending worldwide. Paris Hilton's parting shot, "This isn't over," hung in the air like a storm cloud, and the weight of her words seemed to press down on Jimmy's shoulders. His hands trembled, slightly as he adjusted his tie, trying to regain control. The control room was a frenzy. Producers barking orders through headsets, their screens flooded with social media metrics showing millions of views on the confrontation clips. The ratings were soaring, but so was the outrage, with fans split between praising Jimmy's boldness and slamming his reckless ambush. Jimmy cleared his throat, forcing a chuckle as he faced the camera. "Well, folks, that was intense," he said, his voice strained but still clinging to his trademark charm. "But you know me, I'm just here to ask the tough questions." The audience gave a mixed response, some cheers, some boos, and a lot of uneasy shifting in seats. Jimmy's eyes darted to the wings, half expecting Paris to storm back, but the shadows remained empty. He leaned forward, his fingers tapping the desk nervously. "Let's keep this real," he continued, his tone hardening. "Those parties Paris was at? They weren't just glitz and glamour. My sources say they were a playground for the elite. Drugs, secret deals, and yeah, those infamous hookup rooms. And Paris? She wasn't just a guest. She was in deep." The crowd erupted, some shouting in shock, others egging him on. Jimmy held up a hand, silencing them. "I'm not here to ruin anyone," he said, his voice dropping to a serious register. "But when you're in those rooms, with baby oil bottles stacked like party favors and A-listers slipping in and out, you don't get to play innocent. Not on my show." The audience roared, but the mood was volatile, teetering between excitement and discomfort. Social media was a battlefield. Some called Jimmy a truth-teller, others a ratings-hungry hack. His producers signaled frantically from the control room urging him to pivot, but Jimmy was too far gone. Suddenly the studio doors burst open, and Paris Hilton strode back onto the stage, her silver dress catching the lights like a blade. The crowd exploded, a mix of cheers and gasps as she snatched a mic from a crew member, her eyes locked on Jimmy with a fury that could burn through steel. "You just can't stop, can you?" she hissed, her voice slicing through the noise. "You think you're some crusader, digging up dirt to make yourself relevant? You're a joke, Jimmy, and you're about to crash and burn." Jimmy stood, his face flushed, his grin replaced by a scowl. "Crash and burn? Paris, you're the one dodging questions. Why not just admit it? You were at Diddy's parties, in those rooms with God knows who, doing God knows what. The world deserves to know the truth." The audience was on its feet, the energy chaotic as chants of tell us," mingled with boos. Paris stepped closer, her heels clicking like a countdown, her voice low and venomous. "The truth?" she spat. "The truth is you're desperate. You're not exposing me, Jimmy. You're exposing yourself. You think you can throw around accusations without proof and walk away? I've got my own sources and they say you're not as clean as you pretend." The crowd gasped, the air crackling with tension. Jimmy's eyes widened, a flicker of fear breaking through his bravado. "What's that supposed to mean?" he shot back, his voice rising. "You're deflecting again, Paris. This is about you, about the drugs, the deals, the rooms where the rich and famous played dirty. You were there, weren't you? Tell me I'm wrong." Paris's lips curled into a cold smile, her eyes glinting with something dangerous. "You want to play this game? Fine. Let's talk about your connections, Jimmy. Those late-night meetings with network execs, the favors you've pulled to keep this show afloat. You think I don't know? You're not a saint. You're just louder about it." The audience was in a frenzy now, the studio shaking with their reactions. Jimmy's face paled, his hands gripping the desk as if to steady himself. "You're lying," he said, but his voice cracked, betraying him. "This is about you, Paris. You and Diddy and those parties. Stop trying to turn this on me." Paris laughed, a sharp, cutting sound. "Turn it on you? You did that yourself, Jimmy. You wanted drama, you got it. But don't cry when it costs you everything." She tossed the mic onto the desk with a clatter, the feedback screeching through the speakers. The audience was screaming, some chanting her name, others hurling insults. Paris turned to leave, but not before delivering one final blow. "You're finished, Jimmy. Good luck with the fallout." She stormed off the stage, her silhouette vanishing into the wings as the band scrambled to play a frantic tune. Jimmy stood frozen, his face a mask of shock and defiance. The crowd was in chaos, the control room in panic as producers shouted, to cut to commercial. But the damage was done. Social media exploded with clips of Paris's final words, her accusations against Jimmy trending alongside the Diddy party rumors. The show's ratings plummeted as viewers turned on Jimmy, calling him unprofessional and cruel. Sponsors began pulling ads, and network execs issued statements distancing themselves from the debacle. In the days that followed, Jimmy issued a public apology, admitting he'd crossed a line but insisting his questions were valid. Paris, meanwhile, stayed silent, her cryptic warnings fueling speculation. The confrontation became a cautionary tale in the industry, a stark reminder of the thin line between entertainment and exploitation. Jimmy's show limped on, but its spark was gone, overshadowed by the night Paris Hilton walked off and took his reputation with her. The audience, the media, and the industry learned a hard lesson. In the pursuit of truth, respect, and professionalism were non-negotiable, and no one, not even a talk show king, could escape the consequences of crossing that line.